Before the Rings of Power, there were the Silmarils. Before Sauron, there was his master Morgoth. Before Aragorn and Arwen, there was Beren and Luthien. Join us as we explore Tolkien and all the ages of Middle-earth with your hosts from theonering.com, Jonathan Watson and Michael Grumbine.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jonathan Watson. Well, it could be good morning or good evening.
You just gave it away. It's the afternoon.
It's not our usual time we're recording this. It's the afternoon. My blinds are closed, so the sun isn't streaming in, offering a lot of things. It still looks dark behind me because of those lights. So anyway, thanks everybody for joining us as we continue to move through all the crazy changes Peter Jackson made to Lord of the Rings. No, they're not all crazy. And many people apparently think we are crazy for talking about things like Aragorn's wardrobe change in the films rather than how it was described in the books. But you know what? That's okay. In fact, some people think we actually hate the films because we're just going over the changes. Come on. Like you can go over changes and still like something. I mean, if you change my favorite lasagna a little bit, I can say, hey, there's a change, but I might still really like it.
Yep.
So anyway, don't judge us too harshly, people. Don't judge us too harshly. And we'll get back to the books. This week we're going over four changes, not our usual three. We're really like putting the pedal to the metal here.
To be fair, a couple of them are fairly cosmetic changes.
So we're gonna move into four of them, talking about Gimli, Legolas's boots. I know that's been on the docket for many times ever since on the Babylon Bee I made the point of Legolas walking on snow and how I dislike that. And nobody's going to change my mind about that, but we'll get into it. And his big boots this time, and how just they did Boromir dirty.
Nobody wants to change your mind, Jonathan. It's more fun with your mind the way it is.
Sure seems that way. Nobody loves me. Nah, and then we'll talk about Boromir and some cosmetic changes with him too. Before we do, guys, hey, I want to thank everybody, all of our supporters who join us in our Discord chat, who get our download of our extended podcast where we answer questions and go into more details about the changes and maybe how we would have approached them instead. And it's only $4 a month if you want to join us there. So yeah, go to theonering.com/member. Pay the $4, except you don't have to because the first month is free, and you get the extended podcast, get access to our Discord, and we'll do a live chat again soon. Trying to find the time and the folks to join. It's tough when people are members from all over the world and they're like, no, don't do it on a Saturday night. That doesn't work for me. No, don't do it on a Saturday afternoon. That does. And so we'll find a time. But yeah, join us, theonering.com/member, get the extended podcast. You can get it on your iPhone. You can get it in your podcast app, any of them. You can get it in YouTube. So not a big deal there. And we always post them early. The members episode always goes up early on YouTube for those folks who are members. So you get an email and then link in Discord. So join us there. All right, let's jump into it. Let's jump into the very first one that we have, which is Gimli, the comic relief.
Nobody tosses a dwarf. Not the beard! I have the eyes of a hawk and the ears of a fox. Oh. I'm wasted on cross-country. We dwarves are natural sprinters. Very dangerous over short distances. Talking trees. What do trees have to talk about, Except the consistency of squirrel droppings. I cannot jump the distance, you'll have to trust me. Don't tell the elf. Not a word. That still only counts as one. Certainty of death. Small chance of success. What are we waiting for?
All right. So, I realized after watching this how much comedy there really is with Gimli. I'd forgotten that. I mean, this isn't everything. I went through it and I had to cut back a few bits because there's so many times where Gimli is the quippy comic relief and a little bit the butt end of his own jokes. I found that. Here's what I think the writers did. They looked at Gimli, they looked at Legolas, right? And they said, odd couple. Maybe we lean into that a little bit more. We make Gimli, we make Legolas sort of, the jokesters, the Abbott and Costello, the Laurel and Hardy, the Garfield and Odie of the bunch. And they gave so many comedy lines to Gimli. Now, Gimli in the books, I tried. None of those lines are in the books. None of what you saw was in the books at all. So everything in those clips is changed. There is nothing in here that Gimli actually says. The closest thing, and maybe Michael, you can remember something funny that Gimli said. I did some research. I couldn't find anything. And granted, I can't reread the whole books just for just for this clip to find Gimli saying something. But the only one I could find is the one where he says, "I shall claim full amends for every fall and stubbed toe if you do not lead us well." And this is when he's being led into Lothlorien with his eyes with it being blindfolded and everything like that.
Haldir, yes.
Yes. So that's about the closest I could get with a cursory, 30-minute research.
Yeah, I have one more to add to that, although it's a slightly different tenor. But
what is
there
that?
was at the Paths of the Dead, he does in fact say the line, and my kids laughed at it. They laugh at it when they hear it every time because it is pretty funny. So he's at the Paths of the Dead. Aragorn has entered the Paths of the Dead. The Rangers have entered the Paths of the Dead, who of course don't appear in the movies rather. But the Rangers have entered, and Legolas has entered, and he says, "Here is a thing unheard of: an elf will go underground, and a dwarf dare not."
Yeah.
So there's, which is a kind of grim humor. He is sort of laughing at his literally, humor is a juxtapositioning between two things that are odd, and we laugh at the oddity between them. And so he's in fact doing that directly. So it's a kind of humor, but nothing like the clips that you said. He's clearly, and what's more important to me than just as a general note here, it's not that the movie has lines that the book doesn't, that we're pointing out. It's the change in character. So Gimli's character in the books, generally speaking, is stalwart, grim, practical. He's a fierce friend. But he has a grim sense of humor. The contest with the killing of the orcs, for example, and he's very sort of tough dwarven. In fact, I view it when I read the books as Tolkien giving us a dwarf that is in some ways an upgraded or updated version of dwarves as he presented them in The Hobbit, because his dwarves in The Hobbit were a little silly, and Gimli is not, even though he's literally the son of one of the Hobbit dwarves. And so in the movies, when they change that, they're changing his character.
They do, and I think that it makes the relationship he has with Legolas a little less effective in the films than in the books. In the books, because they are at odds, right? They're not like Gimli isn't joking around really ever in the books, like in the way that he does, right? He doesn't. It wasn't it in Meduseld where he falls over, like there's the drinking game, isn't that in Meduseld?
The drinking game is the most.
I didn't even want to put that in here.
Yeah,
it was too obvious. But it changes his character, it changes the relationship, and I didn't like that. All right, so let's get into the details of what we think when it comes to, is it lore friendly?
No.
Well,
we just made the case that it is not lore friendly.
Right. Do we need to even go into more detail about this? No.
In other words, he clearly is not comic relief in the books.
It's not lore friendly. They don't change. I mean, it's not like Aragorn's change, where they change what he believes of himself in the sense of like who he is. Right. This is more of a personality change rather than a motivational change or a
correct
biographical change. So,
but it's to see. And let me just say at this point, to add on to what you said about it lessening Gimli in a way. Yeah. There's a particular moment in the books and in the movies which it greatly him being comic relief greatly lessens the impact, and that is his devotion to Galadriel. So a comic character
100%
who's devoted, who then it feels, because he's such a comic character in the movies, it feels more like it's sort of this infatuation. Where like a person that's very silly, a class clown, or someone that's just doesn't take the world very seriously and just and is looking to make a joke. If they become enamored with something, we intuitively take it less seriously. The Gimli of the book is a very grave and serious dwarf warrior, and represents the honor of his people, and especially in their conflict with, you know, their antipathy towards elves, not hatred like they have towards orcs, and of course he knows he's on the same side as the elves in the war against Sauron, but he represents that long dwarven animosity against elves. And so for him to turn, and as a grim warrior, a stalwart companion, but a grim warrior who represents his people's honor, for him to turn and be convinced by Galadriel and basically fulfill the role of a medieval knight, sort of giving honor to his lady in a way that is not very American, because we try to sexualize everything. But this is the opposite of sexual respect, that he's given the honor. But taking the token of her hair, or at requesting it, that's straight out of medieval chivalric storytelling. And so it just totally lessens his character by turning him into comic relief at that particular moment. So for that reason, I say no, not really.
Yeah. The weight of his personality is gone.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what it is. All right. Next question. Does the change make for better cinema? I'm struggling with this one. Does it in some ways, yes, in some ways, no. Does it I understand the need for comic relief in a shorter film where you're not reading through the book, and you in very difficult parts it's lighting up. Like the Marvel approach to comic relief, which is like, we're at a very important part of the film and it's very heavy, let's add a quippy one-liner in there, is not the kind of comic relief that is good. I feel like the comic relief where what would be my favorite one in the films? I'm talking myself through this, so I'm trying to figure this out. Maybe it's the one where that last clip where he says, it's a little bit of grim comic relief. He's like, little chance of success, possibility of death, or certainty of death. What are we waiting for? I feel that's a little more in character with somebody who's like, yep, all right, this is where we are. That's what we got to do. And he's adding it to it, rather than the line of, dwarves aren't sprinters, we're natural born long distance runners. I can't remember.
The opposite. He says dwarves are built for long distance, natural born sprinters. Which, by the way, is the exact opposite of the truth. Of course, dwarves are actually
they're hardy and they can like carry weight.
They can run forever if they need to.
That is true. So, but anyway, that kind of a line, which is kind of, it's just there to be funny, rather than, it doesn't really do anything to the plot or to the story at all. It doesn't even tell us really much about Gimli, other than he gets tired, which isn't, like you said, true or leaned on anywhere else in the films. So anyway, I would say, all right, I'm going to say yes on this one, just because I feel like a little bit of comedy is good. I think maybe they went overboard with it, but probably in general, it made for a little bit better cinema here.
Yeah, I agree. So interestingly, it's not lore friendly, and as we'll find out in the next test, I don't like it much, but it does in fact make for better cinema. It serves a cinematic purpose that makes the film, because here is the thing. When you're watching a film or a series of films this long, as a film experience, especially in a world that is cinematically so dark and the message is so grim and difficult, having moments of comic relief or levity are good. And so the question becomes, who's going to do that? Who's going to pull off that levity? Who are the best characters? And interestingly, there is a long tradition in theater and then in movies following theater to make the characters who are the oddest looking the natural comic relief. And Gimli fits that bill. Of all the company, he is the oddest looking. Maybe Gandalf is odd looking, but Gandalf has its own character that's already been established. And so they're hobbits are odd looking too from a certain perspective, and they fulfill some comic relief as well, as we've talked about with Merry and Pippin. So yes, I agree, it does make this for better cinema in this regard, because cinema is a different medium.
Yeah. Do you think in the films he is the primary source of comic relief, or is it more Merry and Pippin?
As far as being mocked, it's him and Pippin. You didn't put in a lot of the mockery, like the the joke about the bearded dwarf women, and you put in one of the mockery, like not the beard thing, but then the biggest one, which is his passing out and belching during the drinking contest with Legolas and things like that. And so I think from a mockery perspective, he's the butt of the most jokes. Well, he and Pippin are, and so that's where I'll land on that one.
Yeah. Next one. How much do you like the change? All right, Mike, you already hinted at this, that you weren't a big fan of this. Where do you land on this one?
So I'm not a big fan of it, but I don't actually rate it super low like the Aragorn one for the actually reason that you gave, which is that it's a personality change in him, not a motivation change. And motivations are deeper, and it doesn't mess with his ultimate, like his whole arc is still the same in the movie. As much as he has an arc, he doesn't have much of an arc, but he still maintains that. I don't think they're changing any essential motivations of Gimli by doing that.
Yeah.
But I don't like it especially for the reason that I think it lessens his character, his serious character as a representative of the dwarves. And so I'm going to go with a 2.6 on this one.
2.6.
Less than 3. Three's middle ground. So I'm slightly underwhelmed by it. It's boosted a little bit though for me because of the cinematic effect, positive cinematic effect.
I feel like this is one of those things where if they would have leaned into the more, if they would have had less of the lowbrow comedy with him, I think it would have made it more effective. Get rid of the burping. Although that was the extended edition only, I believe. So
yes, that was only
take that. Edition. Which I believe Peter Jackson did say is not the official edition, right? The released films, theatrical versions are his. It's not like they're a director's cut. They're just more. He said he did it for the fans. They wanted more, so he gave them more. So how good is it on a scale of 1 to 5? All right, I'm going to go ahead and split the difference again, a 2.5. I don't hate it. I don't love it. I think they could have done better with it if they would have cut some out and maybe made the comedy a little less, like you said, that slapstick, that over the top. It's the ugly guy who gets the butt end of the jokes type of comedy. Right. I would have gone higher with it, but I'll stick with 2.5. So, all right, that's it, guys. We're pretty even on this one here, because it's here's the thing. It's not objectionable. It's not you watch it and you go like, oh, that was so dumb. You're like, they could have done better.
At some of the jokes I laugh at.
Me too. Yeah,
the belching and passing out is stupid, but so a lot of the times he is pretty fun. Like the jokes as told and as John Rhys Davies acts it out, he does it effectively, and he delivers the line well, and the script writing is pretty good as far as the jokes go. It's not trying to be super comedic slapstick in most cases. They are reasonable jokes.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next one. We are on to Gimli, the Hatchet Man.
Let them come. There is one dwarf yet in Moria who still draws breath.
Okay, this one is super simple. This is Gimli, the Hatchet Man, and as we see in these shots here, he is carrying not one axe, but multiple axes. In fact, I believe at one point he has like 4 almost. He has carrying 2, one in his belt and his large one somewhere, I guess, on his back. And here's what Tolkien wrote as they left Rivendell. Gimli the dwarf alone wore openly a short shirt of steel rings, for dwarves make light of burdens. Speaking of our last change where, they're natural born sprinters. Oh, really? And in his belt was a broad bladed axe. Legolas had a bow and a quiver, and at his belt, a long white knife. So, we're talking about Gimli's weaponry here, but I think we can encompass more weaponry as well, just because we don't want to go over every little change that every little person had in every little weapon.
Right. Yeah. Just to clarify, and of course, this isn't evident from our title, maybe, or as evident as it could be, but we are here using Gimli as an exemplar of how the fact that Peter Jackson and his crew did make changes to armor and weaponry of the people of the 9.
And to be clear, this doesn't encompass things like how the hobbits got their swords. we'll talk because that's weaponry, but that's actually a change to the plot. So
Right. We're just talking about the cosmetic differences between how Tolkien sometimes describes.
right.
So the image you have up here, that would be
Of-
basically what Tolkien described as
Gimli with his one large axe.
right.
But then here we have the next photo. Zoom in a little bit. We have Gimli, and you can see he's carrying 2 axes, and in fact, at his belt, right there, is a 3rd axe. I think this is the one he picked up probably here in the mines. I don't even remember if they show him picking that one up, but apparently it looks like it with its little rusty bits.
Yeah, it doesn't,
and then
doesn't look
here's
like his own.
so he has 3 axes, and I'm guessing his broad axe is on his back.
May just not be in the shot.
Yeah.
That's just one of those things.
So 1 axe versus 4 axes. So where do we stand on that? Let's get into that. First question, as per is our usual, is it lore friendly? I'll start here with this one this time. I think it's perfectly fine. I think it's lore friendly. I don't think it's a huge deal. It's not the end of the world. It's not that this changes the character or this changes plot lines or anything like that. If the ring was made into a necklace, or if the ring was made into a wearable filigree or something like that, that's different. But Gimli's axe is not changing the plot, the storyline, the character, or anything like that of the book.
Agreed. I say yes as well. Is it lore friendly? And the reason is because while it is technically against, people need to understand where we're coming from on this.
Spirit.
Because yes, exactly. Lore friendly implies the spirit of the lore, not just the technicalities of the way it's written.
Yeah.
So it is technically a different thing for Legolas to have 1 knife in the books and 2 knives in the movies. But I don't think that, and Gimli to have it. Now, here's where I draw the line. If they're adding so many weapons or weapons of such different nature that it just changes the vibe of the entire character or the actions that they take, then that's a problem. Now,
for instance, like Galadriel in the Rings of Power, she carries a sword. That makes it different. That's not lore friendly.
Yeah, and we love talking about the Rings of Power, so we're not going to in this case. But that, yeah, so I do think it's lore friendly. I was always thinking things like, Tolkien described Aragorn, for example, as having a bow and a sword, but that's it. Do we really think that a guy that travels in the wild and needs to survive and remove branches for firewood and stuff doesn't have either a small axe or a knife on him, a long knife or something like that? Of course he does. Of course he's a ranger. He's going to have things. Tolkien, that just isn't important to the story, so Tolkien doesn't mention all of the bladed weapons or things that might be used as weapons that he might have. So I don't think it's against the lore.
Yeah, agreed. All right, next question. Does the change make for better cinema? Michael?
Yeah. I guess I'm ambivalent. Like, does it make? Oh, okay. Well, actually, you set a trend. You set a trend, which you said if it doesn't actually make for better cinema, then you say no. So that's your line. So, but I read the question slightly differently. I think it visually makes it more effective. Him having more than 1 axe is fine and it actually makes him more formidable as a warrior rather than just the 1 axe. Although that axe he has is pretty impressive, the double-bladed axe. So does it make for better cinema? I definitely think it makes it for better cinema with regard to Legolas, actually, since we were using this as a universal example. Like Legolas fighting with 2 knives, like showing elves being ambidextrous, for example, which is they probably all are from their sort of physical perfection. That makes for better cinema, absolutely. So yeah, I actually think it does make for better cinema to add weaponry as appropriate to the character style. Also, there's are there only 2 famous, actually, Khuzdul lines from Lord of the Rings? There's only 2 famous ones, but the axes of the dwarves are upon you is one of the lines from Khuzdul that Tolkien actually had written in. Khazad Imenu, Baruch Khazad and Khazad Imenu are the 2 lines, and one of them, the axes of the dwarves are upon you, and so implies more than 1 axe. So there we go. Gimli's got more than 1 axe. I know. That's
all right.
That's it.
Yeah. See, here's the thing: is that I feel like the question isn't necessarily even about like does. I think it makes it easier in cinema to say, like, okay, we're going to make him cooler with more axes. It's kind of like having a sequel where he's like, we're going to make it cooler with more villains. You can't make a character cooler just because he's got more axes. I don't think it necessarily makes for better cinema. I think it can, but I think in this case they could have done it just fine with him carrying one axe, or even Legolas with one knife and using it expertly between two hands. Right? It's like a knife
Yeah.
fight.
So are you saying that because you're more ambivalent? It isn't clear to you that it's better cinema, so you won't give it a yes?
I could have. I think if they would have gone back and not done that with Gimli, I don't think it would have made for a worse film. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's my take. Although I can understand why you'd not believe that.
Yeah.
And
No, I
again,
see where you're coming from. I just like the idea of a warrior being shown with more than one weapon because they usually did have more than one weapon. So, yep.
Yeah. All right. Next question: how much do you like the change? It's like it didn't bother me at all when I saw the films. It didn't really even occur to me much because as you're going through the films or as you're going through the books, you don't think about it's not top of mind how many axes Gimli has. So I think, man, I'm doing this a lot, but I'm going to split the difference again. I'm fine with it. It just doesn't matter to me a whole lot, even though it doesn't make for necessarily better cinema, simply because they could have done without it. It doesn't. It's not like I like the change. It's not like I dislike the change. So I'm right in the middle. 2.5.
Okay. Yeah, I do. I think it's slightly better with for the visualization of warriors to be shown with a variety of weaponry, and Gimli's definitely a warrior in the books and the movies, and so I'll go. But it's not that big. I don't love it. I don't think it's a great change. I'm more ambivalent, so I'm gonna go 3.6.
3.6. All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there. I think we need to move on into our next most popular, the all-time awaited, ever since I made this comment on the Babylon Bee podcast back in 2021. Legolas's big boots were made for walking on snow. All right, so you guys listening, what we saw there was Legolas walking on snow with his gosh darn big boots.
I love it. I love every aspect of it.
they're freaking enormous. So here's what Tolkien wrote in it, and let me bring up, for those of you watching, I'm going to bring up a picture of Legolas from the films, and you can see down here he's got some big boots that his shoes fill.
They're just calf boots. They're not even knee highs.
They're big. They're big.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what Tolkien wrote. This is as they're going up Carathras, and there is no sound of Saruman in the air. Legolas watched them for a while with a smile upon his lips, and then he turned to the others. The strongest must seek a way, you say? But I say, let a plowman plow, but choose an otter for swimming, and running light over grass and leaf or over snow, an elf. With that, he sprang forth nimbly, and then Frodo noticed, as if for the first time, though he had long known it, that the elf had no boots. No boots, I tell you, no boots, but only wore light shoes, as he always did, and his feet made little imprint in the snow. So this is a change not by just omission or addition. It's a change by like manipulation. So they're actually saying, no, his shoes are not good enough. We have to make them into boots. Am I leaning too hard into the whole boot?
Well, I feel like just for our listeners who may be listening to this who don't understand the personal history from this podcast of this particular issue or the related issues, it isn't about the boots necessarily, but it is about him running over snow. It's about that passage that Jonathan read. It's an inside joke on this podcast. The reason it's an inside joke is Jonathan, of course, when he was on the Babylon Bees podcast, brought up that he can't stand that Legolas runs lightly over snow because it doesn't appear to work. Legolas is not appearing to be governed by the same physics that governs everybody else, and other reasons.
Not only that, he appears to change the physics based on his need.
Okay, so that was Jonathan is well known for his dislike of that passage. I, on the other hand, based upon, especially as we pointed out when we read on fairy stories later on, I pointed out that I think it's actually perfectly consonant with Tolkien and what he's trying to tell us about elves, which is that they are fairy, They are from fairy. They are not fairy, Fairy, the stupid, silly little creatures. They are in the older tradition of
They're not
fairy.
Tinkerbell.
They're not Tinkerbell. That's right. Good way to succinctly put it. But they come from an older tradition of fairy, as in this other dimension, essentially, this other world, this other path, and that the world has different rules for them than it does for humans, for example, and in small ways, and not in every way, but in some ways. And so this has been just for our listeners that have never that don't understand why we're chortling over this. This is an inside joke. So in that vein, though, the reason I think it's important to bring that up is because of there is something that flows from that, I believe, on this particular issue. So maybe we should bring up the lore friendly, our first question, because I think it bears upon that side of things.
All right, let me get that. So the first question, as always, is it lore friendly? Michael, you said you had something to start with. All right, so is it lore friendly?
Yes, it is indeed lore friendly, and here's why. I think that in the lore, Tolkien is using he's using the boots. He points out the shoes instead of the boots. Like Frodo notices the shoes, right? It's a thing that's noticed and written down later, because of course it's Frodo with some help from Sam and a couple other potential additions that are writing the whole work of the Lord of the Rings. That's the conceit of the books. So he's noticing Legolas's shoes. I think that's Tolkien's way of pointing out to us Legolas is unaffected by the elements. He doesn't need to have boots to, like everybody else, to protect his feet. He's just this elf, this fairy, essentially. He's of fairy. And so the elements just don't affect him the way they affect everybody else. And he then proves it by running off over the snow. So Tolkien's trying to make a point about Legolas's status in the world as from fairy. I think in the movie, the boots convey a similar theme, but in a different way. So I think the boots are there because he would look silly in shoes in the movie. He would look, in fact, it's very difficult for a movie to portray him seriously as an archer, as a warrior at need, and as an elf, without him being clad seriously as a warrior. And so I do think that in a completely visual medium,
because there were never any warriors who didn't wear boots in the history.
Well, not that we're light shoes. That's not a thing that warriors do. They don't wear light shoes. There were warriors that wore other things than boots, no doubt. But because boots are a norm in this era.
Shoes are a little bit of a catch-all, though. I don't think he was wearing like cloth slippers necessarily. He didn't describe his shoes in any sort of detail other than they were light.
Right. But the reason we're bringing this up as its own issue is because there's a distinct difference in the way Tolkien specifically describes Legolas and the way Jackson specifically does. And I think the way Jackson specifically describes, and by describe I mean visually shows us, this is one of the parts of Jackson's artistry when it comes, and all of his crew, when it comes to this world that I actually really like, which is that he created a whole vibe of clothing and armor and the shape of armor and clothing and that fit the elven character, and the elven character couldn't be Trollalolly elves, even though I know that's a big deal in the debate on.
So you're saying light shoes equals Trollalolly elves?
Yes, I do.
I disagree. Yeah. I think that's taking it a step too far. I don't think that just changing your shoes leads down a path of the gravity of.
What do you think of as light shoes? I think of them as like basically slippers.
Yeah, I mean, light shoes, small shoes, not boots. I don't mean like we're not talking about hiking shoes, but something that doesn't have much of a soul necessarily. And here's what I'm saying. I brought up this picture of Nick Groom's favorite character in all of Middle Earth and Lord of the Rings and Arda, Tauriel from The Hobbit, who's also wearing boots. And these are not even light boots like Legolas is wearing. These are heavier leather boots that are far afield from anything like light shoes. And so what we have when he created Legolas, the way he was dressed, they created it separate from what Tolkien wrote, separate from what he intended for the elves. the elves' footwear to be. I can't believe we're talking this much about elven footwear. So anyway, is it lore friendly? Let me bring that back up here on the screen for everybody. This is I want to say. I don't, oh man, this is funny. Okay, I'm going to say no, it's not lore friendly because clearly Tolkien had an intention for what it was supposed to look like and perhaps for what all the elves should have been dressed like. And to say that, as you mentioned earlier, the point of the light shoes was that he's not affected by the elements. Well, clearly by adding boots, you're saying he is more affected by the elements because he has to wear those shoes. He can be a warrior with those boots. He can be a warrior without boots on.
And in
Or
response
maybe
to that,
I'm
I say that he already showed he didn't need the light boots the light shoes to show him. He already shows him as being unaffected by the elements, or less affected by the elements, in that scene where he's walking over the snow and he's not huddling together with anybody else. So anyway, that's all I'm saying is that he brings out a different side of the elves through the leaf edged boots that he gives Legolas. So I go with yes. So we are at odds on this one.
We are for sure. Okay, next question. Does the change make for better cinema? You're gonna be surprised. I'm gonna say yes. It does. It does look better.
A small lowercase yes, though.
Yeah, it was small. I can't do it. It'll autocorrect here. It goes.
I think it absolutely makes for better cinema. Yeah.
I mean, it does look better. Although, because here's the thing, in how Tolkien described it with that quote from how Frodo saw it. Frodo noticed, as if for the first time, though he had long known that the elf had no boots, but wore only light shoes as he always did, and his feet made a little imprint on snow. It's not just a description of the character; it's another character noticing the character, and I think there's more import to that than he had one axe. Frodo noticed, like, he's got only the small shoes on, and these small shoes are important because they left little imprint on the snow. So maybe I'm lending in too much gravity. You guys let me know. Come a member and tell me in Discord how wrong I am.
Yes, please come tell Jonathan how wrong he is. Please do that.
Yeah, because you can do that by going to thewondery.com, becoming a member, and get the extended podcast too. All right, last question. How much do you like the change?
For me, it's a solid like. I really like the elven. I really like the elven feel to the elven clothing. That includes the boots, which there would have been detraction by giving him light shoes to that. I've always loved the dwarven garb and the elven garb and the Rohirrim garb and the Gondorian garb and everything they
did. The Numenorean garb, the
Celebrimborian
garb.
No. Shush, we're not talking about Rings of Power. And so it's a solid 4 for me.
4. All right.
Yep.
Huh. Interesting. How much do I like the change? I actually agree. It probably does make him look better. 3.6. No, 3.7. I'm going to say it probably does make him look better, even though I think it's not lore friendly, and they probably could have made him look pretty good even without heavy shoes. I mean, even if it was sort of like shoes that had straps going up rather than whole boots, like those would be like light shoes or like. Anyway, 3.7. That's what I say. I feel like it's finally out of my system. Like maybe we can drop the whole Legolas walking on snow with light shoes part for a while before you get back to my case.
In the extended edition, one of our wonderful subscribers asks a further question that will require Jonathan to revisit Legolas's ability to act contrary to human physics.
Well, the question will be essentially like if Legolas could jump on falling rocks, what could he do with falling snow? And we will address that in the extended podcast if you listen to the whole episode. All right, let's get to our last one of the day. And that is, they did Boromir dirty. Blonde.
It is a gift. One does not simply walk into Mordor.
Break out the ale! These men are thirsty!
All right, that was a short but brief clip to show that Boromir is just kind of a dirty blonde in this movie. And that is against specifically what Tolkien says about Boromir. He writes this here. I think this was the only quote where actually he talks about his hair. I looked for a little while. This is as after Boromir was killed defending Merry and Pippin. Tolkien wrote, they laid Boromir in the middle of the boat that was to bear him away. The gray hood and elven cloak they folded and placed beneath his head. They combed his long, dark hair and arrayed it upon his shoulders. They didn't comb his long, dark, dirty blonde hair. They didn't comb his frosted tips. They combed his dark hair.
I found one more.
Oh, you did? Okay, good.
This is the Council of Elrond, chapter 2 of the.
How did I miss that? I looked.
And seated a little apart was a tall man with a fair and noble face, dark-haired and gray-eyed, proud and stern of glance.
I'm surprised I missed that. I read through that and I must have just not read that part at all. Yeah. So, and that's because his heritage ultimately is from the House of Beor, which is Baron, and it goes all the way down, and they have dark hair. That's from the very beginning. Like that's kind of where it comes from. And the same thing with Aragorn. Aragorn has dark hair. And so the question becomes, between him and Aragorn, would it have been better in a sense to show that there is a kinship to them by making them look more similar than the distinct difference that there is in their hair? I mean, their facial features wouldn't matter as much, but it would have made his hair dark. I think it would have shown like, oh, there's a relationship, at least some sort of a genealogical relationship between the two at some point.
Right. So these changes with Boromir, I think that was pointed out to in the thread on the onering.com that they also brought in another cosmetic thing, that he doesn't have armor openly the way Gimli does.
Right.
Gimli's the only one that showed his armor. So again, these are cosmetic changes to Boromir, and we will go forth and answer our 3 questions with regard to those.
All right, here we go. First one, guys, is it lore friendly? Is it lore friendly?
Lore friendly. Again, is it in the spirit of the lore to change his hair color? Is it play somehow to the lore to have him blonde haired or dirty blonde? No. I mean, I can't see that being a yes. I don't. Heritage wise, he's similar, and there's multiple times at which we meet dark-haired Gondorians, like Mary, when Mary sees the messenger from Gondor in the tent of Theoden before the weapon take, before the riders of Rohan ride to Gondor's aid. He sees a dark-haired man, and he thinks it's Boromir at first because he looks so alike to Boromir. Right. There's other, Faramir, also dark-haired. Tolkien's making a point, giving them dark hair. It's the point, I think, is about the lineage, as you mentioned. So is it lore friendly? Nah, it isn't.
Yeah. There's definitely one we agree on. It is definitely not lore friendly. There's the point to having the dark hair. It's not just a random
choice. Exactly. And that's why we don't consider it just like a purely cosmetic change. Like Gimli has a couple different axes instead of his one axe. It's actually part of the heritage that Tolkien's pointing out.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so does it make for better cinema? No. In fact, I think it makes for worse cinema. I think it was a bad decision. They should have stuck with showing that the men of Gondor are similar and they come from the same stock.
Yeah, on this issue, 100% in agreement with your point that they should have shown the kinship between Aragorn and Boromir. So, nope. Yeah, this is a quick one.
Yeah, it is. All right. How much do you like the change? I don't. It's kind of fun. I feel it's completely worth. All right. Do I want to? The question is, how low of a one do I want to go? I can't go as low because it's not going to be the lowest one ever. All right, I'm going to go 1.6.
So you very much did not like it then. Did you notice it, by the way, when you were
watching? It seemed weird to me. Yeah.
Okay.
I did. Because I know both he and Faramir, and maybe he had to give Faramir the blonde hair. They did that because they wanted them to look like brothers more. So they added that similarity to it. But I feel like it changes the intention of Tolkien, and I don't really like that. So that's why I give it such a negative.
Yeah, as is my want, apparently, we've noticed now over I'm more forgiving about it. I don't like it. It's a dislike for me, but it's not. It doesn't irritate me that much. No. So I just think it's an opportunity missed more than it. So I give it a 2.1. That's
2.1. It's such an easy change that they didn't need to make. Maybe that's why I feel like it's so low for me. That they didn't need to do it, but they did it anyway. Flying in the face of what Tolkien wrote. So
Yeah, I give it a little higher. Maybe it would have been like a 1.9 or 2.0. I do give it a tiny bump because I understand visually from a cinematic perspective, it's good to have people of contrasting hair colors on the screen. Just like the clothing difference. I understand the purpose that they're doing it for.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. All right, guys, that's all of them for this week. I'm gonna here. Let's take a quick look since we've got this up on the screen. For those who are listening, where do we stand now with our changes? Well, for when it comes to is it lore friendly, Michael is 6 out of 12, and I'm 4 out of 12.
Wait. No, you gotta update the numbers before you say that because we just did one.
Oh, okay. Let's up. You're right. So Michael is 6 out of 13, and I'm 4 out of 13.
Right.
Because we're just adding this one to it. You're right. For does the change make for better cinema? Michael is 8 out of 13 and I'm 6 out of 13. And for our average of how much do you like the change? Oh, let me throw this into my my little calculation here. So you're 3.4 on this one, and I'm sorry, you're 2.1 and I'm a 1.6. So now your average, Michael, is 3.3 overall. Went for how much did you like the change? And I'm a 2.8. Oh. The question becomes down the road, does my dislike of these films show because my average is going to be lower than 2? will I get there? I don't think so. We'll see.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Remember, like we've said this before, but it is worth saying every few episodes.
Yeah.
We're not rating every aspect of the movies because if we were, we would be rating all the good stuff that matches the lore and
that's
you would
right.
get a favorable impression. We're only rating where it differs from the books. So automatically, especially since we love the book so much, we're going to be giving it a lower score than other people might. I just want to make that clear because some people, because this is the internet and this is what people love to do is yell. So some people are really upset by quote unquote how negative we're being. I just want to point out we are purists. We love the books. And we're analyzing only the places where Jackson changed the books.
Right.
So
we're not analyzing like are the Hobbit holes still circular? Are they still round?
Or
right? That'd be a 5.
What do we think of the Shire, the representation of the Shire visually? Actually, it's fantastic. Yeah. Not perfect, but it's fantastic.
We'll get to the party tree eventually, but yeah.
So, but that's what I was like. So we're not just analyzing, what do we think about the Fellowship in general?
And like I said when we started this entirely long episode, we are not here to say we dislike the films because of these changes. We're here to just comment on the changes. We can still like something even though it's changed. Like I said, my lore friendly score is low, but my make for better cinema is higher. So that means that I feel like the lore wouldn't have made for good cinema. So
and to reference something that we just talked about in this particular episode, I, for example, love the various designs that they did for the different races in Middle Earth as far as clothing, armor, weaponry. The visual differences are fantastic. That doesn't show up in any of our changes because Tolkien doesn't say one thing or another about whether dwarven axes had a certain shape to them.
I do miss that Gandalf's eyebrows do not stick out beyond the brim of his hat. That
there are really some elements that I don't think so. I think that falls into Legolas's light shoes. Like it would just look stupid.
Yeah. There's a chasm between the stupid of eyebrows that are longer than the brim of a wizard's hat and the difference in footwear, in my not so humble opinion.
I have something to say about that, but I can only say
let's wait for that
in the subscriber section. So
all right, so we'll move on to that. If you want to become a subscriber, please go to theonering.com/member, become a subscriber. You can hear our the questions we're going to be going over from our members, including is it necessary for me to have a comic relief in a way that a book doesn't? It's an interesting. I never really thought deeply about that in the ways of like, do we expect comic relief in a book? And we're going to talk about the kind of humor that Gimli and Legolas have, that Harrison asked about, and we're going to talk about it is actually Legolas. Could he be part of the comic relief because of how he interacts with Gimli? We're going to talk about all those things in our member section. Get it by becoming a member at theonering.com/members. $4 a month. First month is free, or you can be like our super duper special sponsors, Harrison, Adam, and Lynn, who go above and beyond the call and support us even more. And we extremely appreciate their support as we continue on this long journey of going through every film change in the Lord of the Rings. And hey, guys, if you like this, go into your podcast app and give us a 5-star review. We would really appreciate that. We have some quotes on the front page of the site. Hey, if you put up a new quote, we're going to put it on theonering.com just theonering.com right there on the front page. Boom, we're going to put your quote. Hey, appreciate that. So if you like us, give us a 5-star review. We'd really appreciate that. Let us know what you like about it. Don't tell us what you hate. You can give some improvement, but don't tell us what you hate. I don't want that. All right, let's move on to our extended episode.
Bye, freeloaders.